So tell me about hammock versus tent. You've probably done both. Now that
Oh
you've experienced
man.
both, tell me your
Oh.
takeaways.
See, now I'm qualified to tell you about it because a month ago
Mhm.
for the trip, I would say,
Mhm.
So this was a huge dilemma I had before, and I was going to bring both. But the thing is, the tent weighs more. It's pretty heavy. So I actually also took a cycling bike. So it wasn't like one of those mountain bikes. I just took a cycling bike. And then when I put everything on, this is the thing that's kind of crazy when I do these things. So like I did the same thing I was just telling you earlier. I said, hey, I'm going to ride across Poland. Sounded cool. I told people, everyone's like, oh, that's awesome. And I'm like, well, now I got to do it. And then I like start putting all my supplies on my bike, and I'm like, this is nuts. What am I doing? And my bike was so heavy, like it was just like a leaning tower of Pisa, just kept wanting to fall over. So I did a test run, and I was like, everything's falling off. So I had to like eliminate half the things I had. So it was just basically just warm jacket, warm pants, a couple of like protein bars, and then a hammock. It was really, really simple. Um, and so that's kind of why I brought the hammock. I love the hammock because it's super simple that you can set up anywhere as long as you have like two trees. Or I also found playgrounds is where I would set up as well. So I really, really like that. The only downside of the hammock is the rain. So if you can set up a good tarp system, that would be good. But for me, my tarp system, I ordered it and it was, I guess, a little bit too short. So I remember once in the morning, it started raining the first time, and it was raining and I was getting wet. But I was so tired that I was like just pretending like I'm not wet, just cocooning deeper into the sleeping bag. So I like the hammock. I think it's one of my favorite ways to. I mean, if you set up a hammock if you have lakes, oh my gosh, or anything with a nice view, you can't wake up to a better thing. The other downside of the hammock, though, is that people would see it and they would think that they didn't think someone was inside of it, and so they would want to jump inside. So this happened the first night. So the first night, I'm like riding. I finished by this lake region. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is crazy. It's getting dark, but I'm tired. I need to go to sleep. And there's people in this kind of near this lake region, and so I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna set up this hammock. I'll just have to act like I've done it before because otherwise I'll look like a clown. So I just set it up, and people are still walking because it's kind of like a party lake, I guess you would say. And at 2 a.m., I wake up and there's this guy looking inside of it, and he's like, "Holy shit, someone's in here!" And it's these two drunk guys, and they wanted to just hop in it because it had a nice view of the lake. So
Yeah.
this was a thing I learned, was that this happened all the time, is that people didn't realize that it was empty, and people would come up
That
to it
was
or
not
want to sit
empty.
in it,
That it was not
and
empty.
it was me inside of it.
Yeah, of course, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is fine
So
if the person wants to jump in is that blonde girl that you saw.
yeah, she should have came down with me. She said, "Hey, screw the bed. I'll go rough it with you." I'm like, "Oh,
Exactly.
fantastic."
Exactly. Yeah, but what about
so
so mosquitoes?
mhm. Yeah, so the hammock has a mosquito net. So you hop in and you just put the mosquito net over, and you have no bugs. It's perfect. And if you
Okay.
do it nice and taut, it's super comfortable. Like I thought I was gonna have like back issues, but I felt it was such a nice sleep. I really really liked it.
So what about
So I highly recommend it.
but what about the tarp? You said so you got to put a tarp over it to catch, to protect you against the rain. What could you have done differently? Got a bigger tarp?
Yeah, I think I would have got a bigger tarp. I would have practiced a little bit because when it started raining, I was half tired. I didn't even set it up properly. But basically, you can put up a line over the hammock and then kind of put the tarp over, kind of like a little teepee. I got the tarp just as long as my body was, but then it kind of the hammock stretches out, so the water would kind of still pour in. So that was kind of the mistake I made. Should have got definitely a bigger tarp. But highly recommend the hammock, man. It's just such a great way. It's so light. I mean, they're like this small. So all you need. Oh, the other thing I had was a sleeping bag as well. So sleeping bag, hammock, and you can actually sleep anywhere. Actually, I got inspired by this from our podcast together because you were telling me how you started sleeping in tents, just like in cities, and you
Yeah.
said why not? And then
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting how that became such a paradigm shift in my head because I always think, oh, I'm going to the city, I have to get an Airbnb or I have to get a booking or I have to do this. All of a sudden, when you can just sleep anywhere
Yeah.
and no one's going to charge you anything for it, and you can
Right.
find the best spots ever in top of mountains or lakes. It's like it just changes the whole game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to thank you for that as well, because now it
Sure.
just kind of I'm like, yeah, I can go anywhere I want. Like, why would I hold myself back, or I have to plan in advance of like, oh, this is booked or not booked, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that it's like a security blanket. Like you just know that if all else fails, you've got shelter.
Exactly, and it's just nice to have, and you can just pack into a backpack and go anywhere. I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I really like that. Yeah.
What is your next adventure that you're planning?
So I just did the cycling trip, which was great. I really would like to do another cycling trip, a longer one throughout Europe. I think hitting up Italy, Spain, Greece. I think when it gets nice outside, that would be a phenomenal way to see those countries.
This is another
So
common theme that you probably picked up from your adventures that you do a little adventure, you come back and you're like, holy shit, I'm still alive. I can do that
mhm.
again. And you just up the ante every single time.
Yeah, exactly. I think once you get a taste of it, like I guess they call it like the travel bug, you just want more and more of it. And I'm always kind of think telling myself, "Oh, I'm going to settle down, settle down." And like every time I come back, I'm like, "No, I just want more." And yeah, it just gets more and more, different experiences, different places, different levels of growth, things I want to do. So that's one thing. Also, another theme I realize as well is that people get a taste of it, and then they'll do something bigger. When they come home. And also I think that's really cool that I realized from my podcast guests is that there's like a paradigm shift. Like when you come back to your home, you realize you're like a completely different person, like you realize your mind's been expanded. The experiences have just like kind of put you in a different realm. The people you've met, it's kind of hard to describe. Like every time I come back home, I think I've been in a movie. I was like, oh, that movie that just happened in Korea, or that movie that just happened in Poland, because it's so hard to even describe to people. But you come with a different kind of thinking, different kind of worldview that I think is really, really, really cool. And you usually are really grateful that you went on this journey. And it's very rare that I hear people have regret that they did it. It's usually like, hey, 99% of the time, like, dude, I can't believe I didn't do that earlier.
Exactly. No, it's so true. What about, tell us about your scuba diving experience and what could you learn from that?
Yeah, scuba diving is fantastic. So when I first started this whole journey, I was gonna start off in Australia. I was actually gonna go to a wedding there because I had these friends with these Australians who were here in Chicago, and they said, "Oh, mate, you got to come to Australia." And at that time, I was a broke college student, and so I said, "Hey, I'll come for your wedding." And so we stayed in contact over the years. And one day they called me like, "Hey, mate, I'm getting married. You promised you'd come." So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna do it. Let's do it." And so I flew out there, and before I did, I knew the Great Barrier Reef was there, and I really wanted to scuba dive it. So I took a course here in Chicago, which was there's a great first lesson. Terrible mistake. If you can, go do it somewhere warm, somewhere beautiful. You get the full experience, like in Koh Tao, Thailand, Honduras, any of these places that are tropical. You get the full experience of being there, learning. You have the ocean right there. Like it's just such a much better way to learn and get a great experience. The course, I think, is usually around 4 days if you do intensive course, 3.5, 4 days. But I did it here. It was 3 weeks. Man, I was like training at the YMCA. I did my open water dives in the Joliet Rock Quarry. It was dark. It was cold. It was miserable. I hated it. I was like, this sucks. And then I went diving in the Great Barrier Reef, and I was like, okay, now I understand why people love this. The colors, the sharks, the marine animals. It was fantastic. And so what I would do is each year I did another course. So the next year I did my advanced course in Bali. And then the year after that, I did my dive master course in Koh Tao. And then I, of course, eventually became an instructor. So the first thing I would say is if you're going to do diving, I recommend doing it like a full course somewhere tropical, as opposed to these colder countries, because you're gonna enjoy it more. You're gonna see how amazing
It
it
might
is.
be cheaper too.
Yeah, it's going to be cheaper, definitely as well, because these are kind of like little factories, especially like in Koh Tao. They have like 60 plus dive shops. The whole schedule is kind of split. They've optimized everything to make sure that your experience is incredible. And so I was a little bit jealous I'm always jealous of my students in Thailand. I'm like, God, I wish I learned diving this way, as opposed in muddy rock quarries. The second thing is if you get hooked on diving, I don't think there is a much better experience than doing a dive master course. So I actually had a podcast episode on this, is how to get into your Dive Master 101 with this instructor, Maddie Barks. And I think if you like diving, it's just you get so immersed in it. So it depends on where you do yours, but it usually lasts between a month and 2 months, and it's important to pick the right dive shop and the right dive location where you want to do it, because it's going to depend on, if you want to work there, you would want to start making contacts and networking with those dive shops there. But basically what you're doing is you are learning intensively the theory of diving. You're learning intensively the marine animals that are there. You're diving almost every single day. And so you are experiencing every kind of situation that can happen to you, whether it is currents, whether it is terrible visibility, whether it's storms, whether it's huge waves, whether it's like losing someone, running out of air, customers running out of air. You kind of go through this whole gambit of different experiences that can happen to you while diving. And so when you finish it, you've experienced almost every kind of situation, or let's say most of the situations that can happen in diving, and you feel extremely comfortable after that diving. And then after that is the instructors, but the instructor certification is about 2 weeks, and it's kind of more learning about the teaching aspect of it as opposed to actually learning diving. So if you like diving, the Dive Master is, I recommend to take 1 or 2 months out of your life and just immerse yourself, waking up, at sunrise, going diving, then learning about diving, then going out with your Dive Master trainees for food, for drinks. There's also a lot of fun traditions. Have you heard of any of these traditions? Like the 100th dive?
No.
Oh, so when you have your 100th dive, so I ended on my 100th dive because I wanted to take part in this. Your 100th dive is your naked dive.
Oh.
So sometimes you might be diving and you're looking, and all of a sudden you just see this naked dude with his dong out, and you're like, oh, that's not what I wanted. That is not what I wanted to see at 7 a.m.
But then other times it's that blonde girl from Poland who swims by.
Oh yeah, that's when you're like, hey, let's go this way, let's go that way, and things look bigger in the water too. So.
Exactly, of course.
Yeah, but my 100th dive. Yeah, my 100th dive was a lot of fun. So it was my last dive before I had to leave Thailand, and I joined on to this group, and I asked them, I said, hey, do you guys mind if I join on? I have to do my 100th dive, but it's going to be naked. And they're like, it's fine, just stay in the back. And so I get naked, I put my BCD on and everything, and the captain of the boat comes out. He's just looking, and he's just shocked, and he just goes back inside. But it was actually also a night dive. And then I jumped into the water, and I'm behind the whole group there. And then my mind starts wandering, and I'm like, gosh, there's a lot of like groupers and big fish here. What if they accidentally mistaken my pecker for a little fish?
Yeah, exactly right.
And then they take it off, and then all of a sudden what was supposed to be a funny 100 dive turns into, no more procreation.
Exactly right.
So
awesome.
that's one of the traditions I really liked about the Dive Master. Another one is the snorkel party. So basically, when you finish your Dive Master, each dive shop does a different tradition, but it's a huge thing. You just spent a month or 2 months studying for this thing, and it's kind of like initiation, rite of passage to becoming a Dive Master. And so you have different games like guess the fish and blah, blah, blah. But the final thing is they put a snorkel on you. So they have a mask on. They have duct tape over the lens, and so they have like a nickname for you. Mine was Kim Jong Jordan because I was living in Korea at the time. And then they have a snorkel with a little like attached, let's say, mini bucket to it. And what they do is the bartender will make the craziest concoction he can think of. So it might be tequila, rum, hot sauce, sliced peaches, whatever it is he can find back there. They put into a bucket, and then your official ending for your Dive Master is they pour this bucket into your snorkel, and you can't breathe out of your nose because it's covered with the mask. So the only way to breathe is either to drink it all or spew it up. And so that's kind of a way that you end your Dive Master. There's usually a theme to it as well. You all dress up in different kind of clothes. So I love divers, and the dive community are just really creative. They just love being in nature. They love being together. It's just a really great community to be a part of. I really enjoyed that experience. Yeah.
I appreciate all the insights because I didn't know much about it. Now, for my final question, this is going to be totally changed topics. We're not going to talk about travel here, and you can you can plead the fifth on this one because it's off topic. But since you lived in South Korea and you basically spent a lot of time in Poland, I want you to look on the other side of the border. So look at Ukraine and the situation in Ukraine, and look at the situation in North Korea. Do you foresee any of those places changing dramatically? And how do you see their future? Is North Korea always going to be the Hermit Kingdom. Is the Ukraine war? How's that going to end? I realize this is totally off topic and maybe not your, but you might have spent some time thinking about this. So, what's your 2 cents on
Well,
those two issues?
the first thing I thought of is, how did I always end up in these conflict zones? I recently started thinking I might be a bad luck omen wherever I go. I mean, I moved to South Korea in 2013, and within months, it was one of the highest tensions between North Korea and South Korea. Just after I moved there, Kim Jong-un at that time said he was going to turn Seoul into a city of fire or something like that. And I mean, it was all over the headlines. CNN was saying it's World War III is coming. My family was like, hey, if you want to go live abroad, travel abroad, just go somewhere else. Go to Spain. Go somewhere safer. Don't be in South Korea. And I remember freaking out. And I remember I woke up the next day and it was eerily quiet in my apartment. And usually it's loud. I'm in the middle. I was living in Gangnam in Seoul. I mean, there's always traffic. It was eerily quiet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did a bomb go off? Am I the only one surviving? You know, it was a crazy thought. You know, you could go to bed and you have no idea if you're going to get nuked or not. And so it was my first time going through this kind of experience. I mean, you don't go through that in Chicago. I mean, unless you're walking the streets the South Side, but you're not going to, worry about getting bombed. And so I go the next day to my students and I'm like, why are you guys still studying? Why are you guys so excited studying? Aren't you guys freaking out? This all might be disappearing soon. And they're like, teacher, that guy's like our crazy old uncle. He's always saying that. He's just rattling the storm. He's not going to do anything. So it kind of made me calm down and realize that the Koreans are kind of used to that. They don't really listen to what he says anymore. And I actually ended up going to the DMZ at that time, which was pretty cool too, the demilitarized zone, because no one wanted to go there during that tension. And so I was like, oh, there's no wait. I might as well go check it out. So that was that. My experience then in Poland during the Ukraine war was also kind of surreal. I remember I was in class in the morning and someone whispered. I didn't check my phone that morning. Actually, I was running late, and someone whispered in my ear, saying, one of the teachers, like, "Hey, because of what happened with the invasion, we're gonna not do this and that." And I remember like, "What invasion?" And that's when I found out that Russia invaded Ukraine. And I remember it just completely like shocked me. Like, how could that have happened? Like, no one thought that was going to happen. For real. I mean, they were talking about it a couple of weeks before. I think Biden was saying it's going to happen, but no one really thought it was going to happen in this day and age. And I remember being kind of like shocked, and I remember just being like, what's going on? But out of probably the most uplifting and positive thing I experienced was the reaction that the Poles had in that situation following that. It kind of felt a little bit like post 9/11 in the U.S. People kind of put politics aside. There was kind of like, no, hey, should we do this? Should we not do this? Everyone was helping out however they could. I know people who were opening up their homes, a lot of people who took in refugees, people who were vets were going down to rescue the animals. We were running school supplies to send down there. I was going to the train station to donate supplies. Every single person was helping out. And I remember that was like, it was a really like uplifting. It was a terrible situation, of course, but it was uplifting to see how much the human spirit will come together in order to help people in terms of crisis and in need. So those are kind of my experiences there. I don't react. I'm not an expert on this, of course. In my personal opinion, I don't think the South Korea, North Korea situation is ever going to change. I think the way it is now is kind of like, in my personal opinion, I could be wrong, but it's kind of fits the status quo for everybody. China is satisfied because they have a border with South Korea, who is a huge ally of the U.S. So they're fine with North Korea being there. North Korea, of course, is satisfied having their dictatorship unless the people rebel, but I don't know if that's going to happen. South Korea, has huge U.S. aid. There's tons of soldiers there as well. So they have a huge alliance with the United States, and the United States gets to send a lot of their soldiers and have a foot in Asia. So it kind of seems like, as of now, it doesn't seem like there is a real huge motive for anyone to kind of, rock the boat too much, but I could be wrong. I mean, who knows? Nowadays, it seems like you have no idea what's going to happen. The situation in Ukraine, I have a lot of friends who are Ukrainian, and I think the thing that's kind of gets sad is that, after that situation, I mean, the war's still going on there, and it kind of gets forgotten about as well. People kind of go about their daily lives. I understand, you learn about it, but that situation is still horrible. That situation is still ongoing. And I also don't know how that's going to end. I mean, I never even saw that happening in the first place. So I have no idea, but the resilience, the fight in the Ukrainians is really, really strong. So I can't see them, backing down anytime soon, because the people I've known, the people I've met, the refugees or my friends, I mean, they're like willing to die for this, and the spirit for them to fight for this is like, it's super important for them. So I don't see them backing down anytime soon. While Russia, it just seems such a, if you're a Russian soldier and you're going to fight there, I mean, like, what are you really fighting for?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my experiences with those two situations.
Excellent. Well, thank you for all your insights, Jordan, and tell people how they can listen to your podcast.
Yeah, so I run the Travel Tribe X podcast. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're also on YouTube. Each week I find different kinds of adventurers, sometimes comedians, different kind of people who are kind of trying to pursue something different, see something different, experience something different. So yeah, check us out there.
Awesome. Jordan, it's a pleasure. I will put a link in the show notes. Thank you again.
Thank you, Francis. Keep doing the great work, man. I love your podcast.
Thank you.